Hey everyone, my name is Jeanette and this is a video for the Art Institute Online Student Game Development Project. For those who are new to the project, we are a group of students who are creating a video game together. This video is about the 3D modeling checklist and approval process. Since we're all working remotely and using Drive, it's important that things like naming and file placement be really solid. So for anyone who is confused, please continue working or check out, please continue watching or check out the written version, which I will be posting on the project guide section of the website. So I want to go over the checklist for what we're looking for in the end. So that way, if you're just looking for a general overview, what you need to know is that the file name needs to be correct. Here on Google Drive, inside the IGDA folder, you can go to the naming convention reference sheet, and this will tell you how to name and place your files. So for example, if I'm going to do a character, I want to put it in the folder character. If it is a animated character, which all characters will be a skeletal mesh, so it'll be named SK underscore the identifier of whatever the character name is. So if it's a wolf, it would be SK underscore wolf, and then a suffix for things like the diffuse and diffuse with alpha textures. You do not need a suffix for the max or the PSD texture files because we know what those are. So here are some examples. SK underscore snow.max is the 3ds Max file. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to check that the name is correct and that it's placed in the correct folder. So again, as snow as example, we have sk underscore snow.max, and she's located in the assets character snow folder. She has her own folder because she is the main character, but for example, if it was that wolf, it would be a low-level character or a low-level enemy, which is considered lost. That would be in character lost, and then it would go in here, SK Hellcat, SK Wolf, and there will be multiple enemies within this folder. So is the file name correct, and is it in the correct location? I'm going to back up to Snow, and then the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to actually open that file. I already have it open, and I'm going to check to make sure that the object within the scene is named correctly. So clicking on her, SK Snow. Now, if she was broken into multiple pieces, which she's currently not right now, it's all one piece, but let's say I wanted to detach her eyes and make them a separate item, which I actually am going to do eventually because we're going to change her eye color based on her current corruption. So let's say I just click on her eyes and then I detach them. I'm going to detach them as an object. So now I have SK Snow, and then I need to click on the eyes and name those SK Snow Eyes. That way I know that there's SK Snow and there's the eyes. And let me turn on my edge faces so you can see what I have selected. So the body is SK Snow, and the eyes are SK Eyes. To be more clear, I could also name this SK Snow Body. Either one is fine as long as it does have the SK Snow prefix, so that I know which file it was in. The reason is because sometimes when I'm looking up things in Unity, I have to go by the mesh name rather than the file name. So it's really important that those things are all named. The next thing I'm going to do is check that the material is the same thing, SK underscore snow. Another option would be snow underscore DA for diffuse alpha, because those are the two that it uses. Either way will work. I normally just do it the same as the other stuff just so it's not as confusing, but either way works, whatever's happy for you. The next thing is the textures themselves. Are those named correctly? So as an example, here is Snow's sheet, and this is not named correctly. I have it marked as SK Snow D, which would say that it's a JPEG with just a diffuse. So it's actually a PNG and it has an alpha channel. And I can check that because this part here, the white and black, that's the alpha. That's what I use to determine the opacity of the eyelashes. So I'm going to close that and I'm going to mark it as DA to make sure that it is appropriately named. It's really important because when I import it into the engine, I need to know what kind of shader I need to assign to the material. And if it's marked as a D, I might just think it's a diffuse, and I don't necessarily have every single asset memorized. And I will double check them, of course, but it's always helpful to have everything here named correctly. back in the scene, while I'm modeling and while I'm working on things. So I renamed it, so now it's broken. I have to go pick it out again. I'll just go back to where I have it stored, which is Google Drive, IGDA, Assets, Character, Snow. And as you can see, even with 9 subtrees to go through, I can very quickly find my files because the naming convention and the file sorting is the same all the time. So, well, whatever, it's not working right now, but I would fix that, obviously. Now it's going to bother me. So it goes from alpha, image alpha. There we go. So it's just make sure when you're looking at it in map, if you do have something that is using an alpha channel, when you set up your opacity map, you need to go in here and set it to be based on the alpha, and the alpha source is the image alpha. That way it's not trying to base it off of the RGB intensity of the material. So voila, our material is back in place. The next thing I need to do is check the pivot point. It needs to be at a logical location for the asset. Now, for a character, the character is going to be walking along the ground, so it makes sense to anchor it along the bottom of the character. So I'm going to go into the hierarchy, and by default, I'm just going to set it back to what it was: center and align to world, reset pivot, whatever. So this is where it was. So what I need it to be is centered in the object and along the bottom. So with effect pivot point only, I will center it to the object, which sets it to the center, which is, I want it to be dead center in the center, like center horizontally, and horizontally and depth-wise. But vertically, I want it to be on the bottom, the feet. And the reason of that is, like I said, because when it's grounded, I want it to be grounded based on its foot location. If I have it going based on its waist location, it might show up with the ground at its waist level. So that's really important, to make sure that your pivot point is along the bottom. Finally, if this was a foliage item, a tree, a rock like a boulder, any kind of grass, bushes, anything that's going to be placed onto the terrain through painting. So not manually placed, but if you want to place like a whole field of flowers, you would paint that on. It needs to make sure that the pivot point is rotated forwards 90 degrees, which mine currently is already, and I can tell that because the green arrow is going up. So if you're ever confused, turn off your effect pivot point only. This is how the max gizmo goes based on max space, which is Z is the x-axis, and Y is the depth axis. So what we want is Y to be facing up, and Y is green. So if I click effect pivot, I can see the pivot point is actually green up. So mine's already set. I don't need to change that, and I can leave it alone. So is the pivot point placed logically, and is it rotated logically? The last thing is for animations. I need to make sure that all of the animations are documented. So again, for this character, if I go back to Google Drive and I go to the team task list, this is where documentation would take place. This character is not animated yet, but it's going to have several animations, so it's really important that I know exactly where they start and end. And the reason is because when I go into Unity, I need to assign those animations based on their frame location. So if you're doing the animation, it's really important that you keep track of your timeline where you're starting and stopping. So let's say her idle animation starts at frame 0 and goes to frame 30. I would go to the team task list and say idle frame 0 to 30. And then talking would be the next one, and that would start at frame 31. It's really important that it doesn't start at 30, it starts at 31. And then that would go to, let's say, 79. So I would say frame 31 to 79. Obviously, these are very rough. I have no idea how long they'll be. But that is the process for documenting your animations. So make sure that your animations are documented. And that is pretty much it for the final checklist. So if that's all you need to know, then you're done. If you're confused on the approval process, then stick with me just a second. I'm going to go over that real quick. So start to finish, here's what it would look like. And we'll pick a different character. So I'm going to go down here to the wolf, so something that wasn't claimed yet. The first thing you'll do is you'll go to the task, so the 3D model. I'm going to type in my name to say that I'm claiming it. I'm going to mark the status as being in progress, and that lets people know that I am working on it actively. If you're no longer working on it, or if it's something that it's not in progress yet, you're not ready, just mark it as your name, just so that we know that somebody does intend to do this. If you mark something as claimed but then you never work on it, we'll check in with you and maybe assign it to somebody else. But for the most part, wait until it's ready, mark it as claimed, put it in progress. You can claim subtasks as much as you want. So let's say I know I want to do this whole wolf. I'm just going to claim the whole thing. Do not mark the other things as in progress until you're done with the top one. These are put in order of what needs to be completed first. So 3D model must be complete before unwrap can begin. Unwrap must be complete before texturing begins. This is because, if somebody starts working on the unwrap and then we go back and we revise the 3D model, that's just time wasted. It's work wasted. So make sure it is complete. So you'll mark the task list as claimed, put it in progress. I'll go and I will create my 3D model, save it out appropriately. When I get to a point where I either need feedback or I think that the model is done, if you're confident with your modeling skills and you don't think you really need feedback along the way, you can take it to completion. If you're not sure, or if you're a little shaky and you just want feedback, either way is fine. Come back to the task list, mark it as needs approval, and just put your notes. Say, I'm not sure about her mouth. Looking for feedback. So that just mark feedback. Just so that we know that that's what you're looking for. You're looking for some feedback. You need some approval. You need something there. If you're done, you don't need to mark anything. Just mark it as needs approval. If Rocky is our 3D lead right now, so he will be the one doing the approving on this, or if he can't make it, then I will, or somebody else. One of the leads will definitely check into it. If you mark it as needs approval and it needs revision, we'll mark it as needs revision and we'll put a note. Generally, we'll mark it with our initials, so I would say JM, close her mouth by default pose. So that, just make sure that, I would say, okay, like her mouth is open right now. I need the default pose to have it closed so that when we animate it, we can swing it open and closed easier. Or we just have a clearer defined closed pose, whatever. Whatever the feedback is. When you see this thing, that marks as needs revision, it's just an identifier for you to know. So you say, okay, I've seen this now. Put it back in progress and delete the notes if you need to. That lets us know that you've seen the feedback and you're working on it. You can leave a feedback note if you'd like. Okay, we're working on the mouth. Whatever you feel is necessary. If you don't feel that's necessary, then don't. And then you just repeat it. When you're ready again, you mark it as needs approval. Keep repeating until the model is done, and then the person who is reviewing, Rocky or myself, will either mark it again as needs revision, or when they're finally done, they'll mark it as approved. So you're now complete. When you are completely happy with your thing, so let's say like they've marked it as approved, you're happy with it, you're not going to make any changes, you need to go in and mark it as completed. That is not the lead's job, that is the person who's modeling, doing the actual work. It's just so that you are letting us know that it's done and you've gotten approval and you are no longer working on it. After that, the next stage can begin. And this follows the exact same format. You mark it as in progress, you go do the unwrap, you mark it as needs approval, they'll come back and mark it as needs revision or approved, leaving notes along the way. When it's in an approved state, you, the person doing the unwrapping, comes back and marks it as completed after it's done. Same thing with the texturing, the rigging, animation, it all works the exact same way. Individual checklists for each state, when you mark it as needs approval. So let's say you have this 3D model and you have it as marked as needs approval. What we're looking for in the approval process is the topology. Is the mesh density good? Does the edge flow make sense? Do you have too much geometry or too little geometry? Does something not make sense? So as an example, just looking here, this has a pretty clear edge flow everywhere. There's more geometry in the places that are going to bend a bit more. There's less geometry in areas that are bigger and maybe don't need as much. Even this could still have used some more work. It's probably a little dense here in the belly. There's not going to be too much work there. I could have cleaned that up a bit. So even they're never going to be perfect. Some things that I may have fixed up, like I said, the jaw and everything. I'm not sure about how that. I noticed that one of these claws is upside down. So things like that would have been checked if I had been going through this approval process. But because she was the first model, we didn't really have things set up yet. Now that we do, I'm going to have to go back and fix this. But this is the whole reason of having this approval process. We're also going to be looking for the shape. So if we turn off edged faces and we turn on consistent colors and just assign like a default gray material to her, what I'm looking for is, does the shape make sense from any angle, without any lights or anything? Does she have like a clearly defined shape? Can I tell what it is? So even without the texture, does it make sense? I think it's really important to have like a strong silhouette. I can tell where her nose is, I can tell where her ears are, her little tail pops out. So those are the kind of things that we're going to be looking for. And it's going to vary by each character, of course. Everyone is not going to be the exact same. And that's pretty much it. So that's what we're looking for in the modeling stage. In the unwrapping stage, we're looking for how you made use of it. So for example, I'm going to put my unwrap UVW modifier on so that we can take a look at it. Open UV editor. So we're looking for seam placement. The seams should be hidden if possible. So I'm putting them in the tight corners where you won't necessarily see it as much. On the inside backs of the legs where it might not be seen as much. There's some that are more obvious, like here on the head. That's because I want to utilize this space better. So this is the exact same as this side, and it's a really low detail area. So I cut it in half and flipped it. The face I modeled separately so we could do some asymmetricality, but I ended up doing it symmetrical anyway. So we could have cut this down the center as well. I wasn't sure if I wanted to make some kind of one-sided effect. So that's one of those things where having a clear plan of what you're going to do can really help you there. Now if I go back to my layout, I'm going to turn the grid off so we can see it clearer. What you'll notice is that, for example, this body, if I click select all and select this side, this body actually is completely overlapped with this side. They are identical. Well, they were. I moved them now. But they were completely overlapped. So you want to overlap your textures as much as possible. And the reason that we do this is because if I turn on that texture in here, it lets me utilize that space so much better. I only need to model half instead of taking up twice the amount of room for the same thing. And you'll notice that this entire character is symmetrical, so everything here is overlapped. The eyeballs are overlapped, the teeth are overlapped, the teeth, the claws, the teeth, the hands, the feet, everything is an overlap, except for that face, which I did do asymmetrical on purpose because I thought I was going to do an asymmetrical element. That's something where I could go back and cut it in half, but there's really no point in redoing the whole mesh for that at this point. So that's what we're looking for with that. We'll go into more detail into how to unwrap your character and how to do completely symmetrical things in the unwrapping video, which we'll be doing in 2 weeks, I believe. We're doing a weekly seminar, and this week is 3D modeling, and then so next weekend would be the unwrapping. But anyway, so that's what we're looking for there. For texturing approval, we're looking for the color scheme. Snow is a little different because she's a solo character. She doesn't really fit into the Nightmare color scheme. But anything that is part of the Nightmare environment needs to follow that Nightmare color guide, which you will find in the OPA concept art, and I'll move that into the design actually, so it's because we're using it universally now. It needs to fit into this color scheme. There can be some variation, but for the most part, we want everything to be these dark purples, dark blacks, kind of desaturated purples and reds with just little highlights of color. So as an example, not snow, but I'm going to go to my assets, environment, flora, and pick out the large flower model that I worked on. So I'm going to just pull up the PSD because the alpha channel kind of cuts that out. So this is the diffuse map for that. And this is also an example of how your diffuse or how your textures could be laid out. So I have a folder, I have all of my work. So I can separate each thing individually, turn things off, change things around if I need to. I also have my layout, for like my guides for drawing it if I needed it as well. Up here on this part, I have each individual texture saved. So I have my diffuse, I have my alpha, I have my emissive, and I have a normal map. Which of these we're going to use is still in debate. I think I'm just going to be using the diffuse and the alpha map, but I would save those out as a JPEG. But that's an example of how that would be laid out. So that's what we're looking for in the texturing. And then, again, we don't have an animation example with this character, but during the animation approval process, we'll be looking for rigging, weighting, is it logical? I move the hand and the hand moves, not the arm. I move the arm and the arm moves, but not the hand. If I move the elbow, does it also affect the ear? I need to, make sure that it's logical and cleanly set up and that things are deforming correctly. So if I bend the arm, does it have a nice crease in the elbow and the elbow back here stretches? Or does it kind of deflate? Those kind of things. And the last thing is the documentation of the animation. So back on the team task list in the animation section, again, if I had like an idle animation, I need to mark down frame 0 to 30 to let me know what frames that animation takes place in. And that is, again, the final checklist of everything that you'll need to get your model into a completed state. Once everything is done, so you've gotten approval on this and you mark it as complete. You've gotten approval as this, you mark it as complete. You've gotten approval on that, you mark it as complete. And we'll just go down and say that you have everything done. The rigging, the animation, everything is really solid and it's ready to be put in game. I will do a final check and I will check all of these things. I will check the topology, I will check the unwrapping, the texturing, the animation, all of the naming. And I'm primarily going to be focusing on the file names, object names, material names, pivot points, scale, and animation documentation. And scale is something I didn't really mention too, but it is important. Make sure that your model is appropriately scaled. If you're not sure, please do check in. We can give you a rough estimate. The best way to do it is just import Snow into your scene so that you can compare her yourself. Or import it into the test scene. Either way works. So once all of these are complete, I'm going to go through all that and check it, and then I will mark the asset as finalized, and I will delete the extra subtasks, and it will just be mini wolf finalized. That means that everything is done, and I am putting it in the engine. After something is finalized, do not make any changes to any of the sub things. You can't modify the texture, you can't modify the PSDs, you cannot make any changes without talking to me, Jeanette, directly. This is because, like I said, I've already put it into the engine, so I won't know to update it unless you let me know. And changes made after finalization should try to be kept to a minimum so that I don't have to, worry about overwriting things in the engine too much. So that's it. I know this video is a little long, and I know that the process can be a little daunting, but it's very easy once you get used to it. Mark it as in progress, get approval, mark it as complete. Mark it as in progress, get approval, mark it as complete. Follow the naming conventions. I have examples for everything written here. This includes characters, it includes flora and structure things, it includes background music and ambient loops and dialogue. Everything is pretty much marked down. If there's anything that you find there is not here, give it a temp name, but let me know so that I can add it to this sheet so that we do have examples for everything. And if you have any questions, again, please let me know. I'm always available to you, and I look forward to making games with you. We'll talk to you soon.